Hi guys, hi everyone. I guess we're back for another video of Cross Connect, your channel, our channel to share the information between the two communities. As I said, the goal of that channel is to share the information the way they are addressed between the French community, that is basically the Quebec province in Canada, where I'm living, but also the rest of the French community across the pond, the Atlantic Ocean, and it's basically France, Switzerland, Belgium, and some West African countries in our beautiful continent of Africa. Okay, and the rest of the community, the English community, is actually the rest of Africa, England, separated by the pond once again, and Canada and US. Okay, but also naturally in Asia, there are some countries speaking English, and they are naturally welcome to join us. But basically, this is, what I'm trying to say is to connect the dots between the two communities. So after the roots of racism, the 5 proofs of God existence or God creation, I wanted to touch about the American revolutions and the French revolutions, the differences and the similarities that exist between the two events. Okay, so now let me share my screen. I love to have some slides that I'm using all the time. So let me share with you the agenda. Okay, first of all, we'll talk about the spark. What were the causes and preconditions that ignited the revolutionary flames? The flames themselves. The deep dive into the key events, turning points, and leaderships that define each revolution. So that would be quite interesting to dig into it. Okay. Now the aftermath. Understand the immediate and long-term consequences of both revolutions. You will see this is really fascinating, the role they play, and sometimes we don't even, pay attention to how deep actually these two events had on our common history. The global impacts, an assessment on how these revolutions influenced the broader world stage, and actually we'll do the modern echoes and the enduring legacy of these revolutions and contemporary society, and we'll finish with a conclusion that will be also quite interesting to provide my own view of it. Now, once again, the drill. If you disagree with some of the elements I'm saying, you are totally welcome to leave a comment or to say that you disagree. I respond to all the comments, so that would be my pleasure to respond to them. Okay, so now I'd like to point out that the American and French revolutions, even though they're separated by the pond, the Atlantic Ocean, and separated by almost 10 years, these are so important in our modern history that they even define the timeline of history. Remember in the roots of racism, I was explaining the way that history is actually segmented between antiquity, that was finishing in around 500 BC, and then the Middle Age was from 500 BC to 1492 with Christophe Colomb discovery of South America. And then the Quattrocento, the Renaissance, the reminiscing part, the modern history that we call, it's basically for 1492 to the American Revolution or the French Revolution, depending where you stand, from close to 1775 to 1789. And then from the American or French Revolution, you're entering into the contemporary history, which is our time, right? So this is so important. So this is why these two events are really stand as monumental turning points in world history. Both events as well ignited political and social, political and economic upheaval that reverberate to this day. The impact that these two events had on our history, we don't pay attention to it, but It's really important. While sharing some common ground in the pursuit of liberty and equality, these revolutions were also shaped by distinct historical, cultural, but also societal context. Naturally, if you look at history of France, it's much deeper in history because it started with. You will see that in a part one in the spark. I would explain, the origin of France, and naturally we'll touch about the origin of USA or the American colony at the time, and you will see this is dramatically different. These two state or these two country are fundamentally different. Okay, so two major events in the history of man: the American Revolution, with a timeline that started in 1765 to 1783, but with the military phase from 1775 to 1783. The French Revolution, which started the 1st May 1789 for the Estates Generals. I will explain what it is, and it ending up in 1799 with Napoleon Bonaparte's coup d'état with a consulate period. Okay, to fully appreciate the nuances of these pivotal events, we will embark onto a comparative analysis. As I said, we'll talk about the spark. The spark is really the exploration of the underlying causes and preconditions that ignited the revolutionary flames in both nations, including the social, economic, and political climates. We'll go into the details of that. That would be quite interesting. Then the flames will have a deeper dive into the key events, turning point, the leadership that was shaping these two revolutions, but also comparing and contrasting the strategies and tactics employed. Okay, that will be quite interesting to see how it was actually infusing into the society. Now, the aftermath. The aftermath is more an examination of the immediate and long-term consequences of both revolutions, including the establishment of new forms of government, social reforms, and economic impacts. Okay, and the global impact on part number 4 will go into the assessment of how these revolutions influenced the broader world stage. As I said earlier, shaping international relations, inspiring independence movements, and contributing to the development of political ideologies. Okay, and now the modern echoes. If we think about it, there's a reflection about the enduring legacy of these revolutions today, analyzing how their principles and ideals continue to shape our world as we speak. Okay, now we'll try, at each part, we'll try to have a mini conclusion, something to exacerbate a little bit the difference and naturally in the similarities. You will see I will be spending a little bit more time on French Revolution because the context it's richer and deeper. But naturally, if I forget something about the American Revolution, please don't hesitate to highlight this in the comment. I will be happy to do another video to cover all your comments, and that would be quite interesting to do as well. Okay, so now I will see you in a part 1, the spark. Guys, I guess we back for the part 1, the spark. Okay, now you will see I'll spend a little bit more time on the French Revolution because the context is more dense, richer because of the history, but you will see naturally differences and similarities. Okay, the British colonies, the foundation. Okay, this is really the foundation. The American colonies were established primarily in the 17th century as an extension of the British Empire. The British Empire was effectively encompassing different regions in the world. It was touching North America, South America, naturally Europe, but also Asia and Africa. Okay, so you will see the image right now. These colonies were founded with the dual purpose of economic gain and religious refuge. If you remember the history, naturally there was some persecution against the Protestant, the Protestant minority. So, and people were fleeing actually the persecution from the Catholic Church and also from the states in Europe. So Protestants were, you know, taking the boat to America for a new beginning. The economic model was largely mercantile, so with raw materials exported to Britain and finished goods from the British manufacturers were imported back to the American colonies. Initially, the British government exercised a degree of neglect over the colonies, like they were leaving them making their own decisions, living their own life, allowing them significant autonomy. However, this began to change in the mid of the 18th century, okay, because of the 7 Years' War, also called the French and Indian War, between 1754 and 1763. This is a pivotal turning point of this war that was taking place in Canada between France and the Great Britain, a conflict that was to decide who will be exerting control over North America. Okay, the British emerged victorious, incurring substantial war debts on both sides. On both sides, the cost of that war was enormous, and it was difficult now for the two empires, French and British. So now they needed to recoup the cost and assert a greater control over the colonies, because now they were fearing that perhaps what happened in Canada, in Quebec specifically, you will see the map as well. Then the British government began to implement a series of taxes and regulations to exert more control and to recoup the cost of the 7 Years' War against France. Now, the second part is really the taxation without representation. The colonists who had grown accustomed to self-governance vehemently opposed to these new measures, okay? Arguing, well, you want more taxes? No problem, but we need representation in the British Parliament. But British was saying, you are a colony, you are nothing. So you pay, and we exert the control, okay? So if they lacked representation, they were not happy, and they didn't want to be subject to additional taxation. So now there were different situations that were starting to create a resentment. The Stamp Act of 1765 imposed a tax on printed materials and sparked widespread protest. Second, Townshend Acts in 1767 levied taxes on importing goods, leading to further unrest and boycotts. The Boston Massacre of 1770 was a violent confrontation between British soldiers and colonists, further inflaming tensions. And now there's also this big event that is called the Boston Tea Party, that you will see an image right now about the Boston Tea Party. But it's a fantastic event that took place in the Boston Harbor. A particularly significant event was this Boston Tea Party of December 16, 1773, in protest against the Tea Act, which granted, because the British East Indian Company had a monopoly on the tea sales in the colony. So they were, exporting tea from India and then selling that to the different colonies of the British Empire. So a group of colonists disguised as Native American boarded British ships, dumped the tea into the Boston Harbor. This act of defiance galvanized colonial opposition and pushed the colonies closer to rebellion. But basically, if you see the image, it was pure chaos. And people were actually extremely, against this monopoly and the way it was imposed onto people. Even though you didn't want the tea, you had to pay for it. You have to take it and to pay for it. So as a result, naturally, because it was a chaos and it was a significant act to show a real rebellion against the colonial empire. So the British government responding with the intolerable acts, a series of punitive measures that further alienated the colonists, simply because now they were saying it was not the will of the British government. So now these acts including closing the Boston Harbor, altering the Massachusetts government, and allowing British troops to be quartered in private homes. So basically, they were expelling people from their homes to take place and to exert more control over people. So these events, coupled with a growing sense of identity as Americans, because they were feeling more American than British anymore, these events, coupled with a growing sense of identity as American, rather than simply British subjects, more and more they were feeling in phase with the environment, with what they were building all together as a community. So they were feeling more American than really British citizen. So this was a fertile ground actually for revolution. The stage was set for the outbreak and armed conflict, starting in April 1775 at Lexington and Concord, marking the beginning of the American War of Independence. Because we tend to say American Revolution, but the American Revolution, it's a long stretch, of a movement that was started. As I said, it's a timeline set of events starting in 1765, ending up in 1783. But the military action or the military phase only started in 1775 at Lexington. Okay, that is the end of the spark for the American Revolution. Let's move on to the French Revolution. Okay, so now let's talk about the French Revolution. You have to understand that the history, once again, the history of France versus the history of US or America is totally different. We can trace back the roots of of France to be traced back in centuries. Okay, and also the roots of the French Revolution could be traced back even almost at the beginning of the origins of France, because of the structure it was made of. Okay, so let me explain. You have the Carolingian Empire under Charlemagne. Charlemagne laid the groundwork for a centralized monarchy in France. So basically, Charlemagne was a Germanic guy, what we call the Franks, Francs, Franks. So this is a tribe from Germany that moved into France and installed themselves into France. After years of war, they were established an empire. The people who led, who supported Charlemagne, the guy who fought the wars for Charlemagne to establish this Catholic empire, they were giving rewards. The rewards were titles and lands. Okay, this was the goal to have a centralized monarchy in France. On top you will have the king. That will be the empire or the king. That will be Charlemagne. Okay, following his death, the empire fragmented, leading to a feudal system where power was distributing amongst the nobles. So you would have a feudal structure coupled with the influence of the Catholic Church. And you can see the result. You can see on the image, you can see the nobility, the clergy, and the third estate. And for centuries, it was a system the French society was based on. Okay, and Charlemagne his reign was only from 768 to 814, so 1,000 years before the French Revolution. But already from the get-go, you see there's a problem. There's a problem on what? I will explain that in a second. But basically, more control, more taxes on the vast majority of the people, and the people on top were totally exempted from taxes. Okay, so you see already the problem. More control, more taxes. Same situation as for the American Revolution. So the French aristocracy, comprising the nobility and the clergy, because the member of the clergy was mostly coming from the nobility, enjoyed immense privileges, exempted from most taxes, and holding positions of power. The third estate, encompassing the vast majority of the population, bore the brunt of the tax burden. The social hierarchy, coupled with economic disparities, created significant tensions within the French society. Now we have a rising force, the bourgeoisie, the middle class. Now we're moving ahead 1,000 years later, okay, in the 18th century, okay. Now a new class, a new social class had emerged, the bourgeoisie, the middle class, okay. Composed of merchants, bankers, lawyers, and intellectuals, the bourgeoisie amassed considerable wealth and influence, despite their economic power. They were denied political representation, really a similarity with American Revolution, a disparity that fueled resentment. The Catholic Church, deeply intertwined with the monarchy and the nobility and naturally the clergy, held immense power and wealth. While initially a unifying force, the Church involvement in secular affairs and its privileged status increasingly became a source of contention. So you see, more control, more taxes upon the poorer part of the society created a lot of issues. Now the age of enlightenment and the critique of the end of the old regime. Okay, the old regime is basically the system that I was describing of the nobility, the clergy, and the third estate. The 18th century witnessed the rise of the Enlightenment. The Enlightenment is the philosophical movement that emphasized reason, individualism, progress. The French philosophers as Voltaire, Montesquieu, and Rousseau critiqued the absolute monarchy, the aristocracy, and the church. For the absolute monarchy, you need to understand where it's coming from. It's coming from Louis XIV. Louis XIV was calling himself the Sun King, the one that has so much power that the sun bows on him, right? So he was the light of the French society, basically. Okay. Now, the ideas of the philosophers disseminated through the encyclopedia. The encyclopedia was a book that all the philosophers contributed into that challenged the foundation of the old regime, such as natural law, the notions of liberty as defended by the American Revolution, which took place almost a decade prior the French Revolution. And the French supported the American Revolution. They invested into it and actually lost large sums of money and wealth into the American Revolution because it was seen as a revenge against the 7 Years' War. And also the philosophers pushed about progress, tolerance, fraternity, constitutional government, and a formal separation of the Catholic Church and the state. So you see no more of this Catholic Church, imposing ideas and defining the natural law of the society. Now, philosophers and scientists of this era would widely circulate their ideas through meetings at scientific academies, Masonic lodges, literary salons, coffee houses. It has seen the creation of something very interesting, the Society of the Friends of the Blacks, which was created in 1788, a year before the Revolution, and remained active until autumn 1791. These members were clearly abolitionists, with abundant literature to support its concern, which led to abolish slavery in 1794. Okay, the Enlightenment movement was accepting actually women, and certain meetings and salons were actually created and managed by women. So it was really an evolving kind of methodology and an approach that were really encouraging women to become much more active in the society of men. Okay. Now, the economic crisis and role in discretion. The reign of Louis XIV, as I was saying, known as the Sun King, was marked by extravagance, costly wars, including the War of Spanish Succession. His successor, Louis XV, continued this trend, exacerbating France's financial problems, the 7 Years' War, the American Revolution, in which France suffered, well, the 7 Years' War, in which France suffered a defeat against Great Britain, but they were also supporting the American Revolution, which cost additional money, which further drained the treasury. Okay. Now, to finance these wars and maintain the opulent lifestyle of the court, you need to understand what it is. It's actually the king and his entourage, and his entourage is about 4,000 nobles that were living in Versailles. Okay, and they were living like, really luxury lifestyle. It was totally crazy. Now, the French monarchy imposed heavy taxes on the third estate. This unsustainable fiscal policy, coupled with a rigid social structure and the growing influence of the Enlightenment of ideas of the philosophers, created a volatile situation ripe for revolution. Once again, it's almost the same, but the difference is enough is enough. But for 1,000 years, they were imposing on them, and they were, enough is enough, basically. Now, France's support of the American Revolution, seen as a means of revenge against Britain, also contributed in that financial strain, even more than it was already. Already it was difficult, but now it was really critical. The provision of the troops and financial aid diverted resources away from domestic needs and exacerbating economic hardship. It means the cost of the bread. The cost of the bread was almost costing almost 30% of the living of the people that were poor, the third estate. Okay. In summary, the French Revolution was the culmination of centuries of social, economic, and political tension. The rigid social hierarchy, the disproportionate burden of taxation on the third estate, the economic mismanagement of the monarchy, and the inspiring ideas of the Enlightenment all contributed to the explosive conditions that led to the overthrow of the old regime. People were just so fed up about everything. They wanted to have a change. Now we reach 1789. So 1789 is the year of the French Revolution. Building on the foundation that we've established, all the financial strain, the rigid society, the taxes on the third estate, clergy and nobility were not paying anything. Let's dwell deeper on the specific events and conditions that precipitated the French Revolution. First of all, the growing resentment of the third estate. As mentioned, the third estate bore the brunt of the tax burden while enjoying minimal means no political representation, not at all. The inequality fueled growing resentment. They were paying, as you can see, the number of taxes. They were paying the tithe. It's a direct tax, primarily affected the peasantry. It's a significant portion of the third estate. Okay, the gabelle is the sole tax, almost like the tea tax in American Revolution. So even though you don't want any salt, you have to take it and you have to pay it. If you don't want to take the salt, that's fine, but you're paying the tax nonetheless. Okay, heavily regressive and despised by the population. And you have the tithe. It's a church tax that further burdened the peasantry. And now you have additional tax. You have the wine tax. You have also the when you're trading from one region of France to the other, you're paying customs, and all these taxes, everything was pushing many peasants to the brink of poverty. They were all already really quite bad, but now they were really hitting the rock bottom. Okay. Now, to change the situation, as I said, because the financial situation in France was terrible, there was the need for an Estates General, a catalyst for change. So, to address the deepening financial crisis, King Louis XVI convened the Estates General. It's an assembly where all the social classes will be united to discuss about additional taxes. Okay, so in May 1789, this was the first meeting of this representative body, and they didn't meet since 1614. So for more than 150 years, they didn't meet. Okay, so the Estate General was composed of the three estates: the clergy, the nobility, and the third estate. You know, I always put nobility first, but in reality, the clergy was the third estate. Second was nobility, and the third estate was the last one. But why clergy? Because clergy was generating tons of money, because they were the largest land owner in France, and they were also managing most of the taxes. And nobility was living off the land that they were taking advantage of the peasants, what we call the serfs, and also the villeins. Okay. Now the voting procedures about this estate general. The traditional voting method by order, each estate had one vote, favored the aristocracy and the clergy because they were voting in the same direction, right? To maintain the status quo. And the third estate were not happy with it. They were saying, we have more deputies, but if we're voting by order, it doesn't mean anything. We need to vote on voting by head, which will give them a majority. So the issue became a major point of contention. So now, frustrated by the deadlock over the voting procedures, the members of the third estate declared themselves the National Assembly, because they were representing the vast majority of the people living in France. They were saying, we are the National Assembly. On June 20th in 1789. They decided to only disband themselves when they will deliver a constitution to France. And the third estate proposed to other states to join them, but only a few members of these clergy and nobility estates decide to join them. Okay, this was a bold act, okay, marked by a significant challenge to the royal authority and ignited the revolutionary process. Okay, as the third estate refused to play ball, they decided to split and came back to hold an assembly on the 23rd of May and found the place of assembly closed. Okay, they decided to find refuge in a tennis hall. It's le jeu de paume. It was not tennis with the racket and everything. It was more a game you were playing with the end with the ball. Okay, well, we call that the jeu de paume. Now they were finding refuge in a tennis hall or jeu de paume. It was a hall when you can play this game, and the Grand Master of Ceremonies of the King asked to the third estate to disband. Mirabeau, he was a noble who moved from the nobility estate to the third estate, stood up and said to the Grand Master of Ceremonies of the King, tell to your master, the king, we are here by the will of the people, will only leave by the power of the rifles. It was really a famous claim by Mirabeau. Was a really elegant persona that was extremely vocal and eloquent. So that's what he said to the face of the great master of ceremonies. Okay. Now the storming of the Bastille. So the National Assembly defiance was met with resistance by the king. They were about to enter the assembly or the jeu de paume to force them to disband, and finally the king rolled back and said, no, we can't do that. It's going to be even more serious. Rumors of the royalist crackdown circulated in Paris, and on July 14th, 1789, people were saying, oh, we need weapons to defend ourselves. So now in that case, we need to storm the Bastille. They went to the Bastille, a symbol of royal authority, in search of weapons and gunpowder. The fall of the Bastille marked the beginning of the insurrection and inspired revolutionary fervor throughout France. And after that, it was really, nobles and also clergy was severely beaten and harassed by the third estate mobs. Basically, it was happening all over France. So, but there's a little story in the story. There was the commandant at the commander of the Bastille. They were equipped with weapons and everything, and they could have fired on the mob to kill a lot of people, and they could have used cannons to fire on them, and they decided not to fire on people that were representing the people of France, and as a result, the guy got killed and beheaded. And so he wanted to save them, but they didn't think about him, so they killed him and beheaded him. Now, these events set the stage of the radical transformation that would follow. The National Assembly would go on to abolish feudalism, draft the Declaration of the Rights of Men and the Citizen, so the Human Rights Declaration that is famous in France, and ultimately overthrow the monarchy. Okay. Now, if we want to strike a mini conclusion, now you need to appreciate that there's an additional element, the Enlightenment influence in the American Revolution. So, as I said, the Enlightenment and the philosophers had serious impact on the way that people were fueled with ideas that will generate some rebellious kind of feelings. Okay, but it was the same in our American Revolution. You had key thinkers that were impacting the American Revolution, including John Locke. John Locke, his concept of natural rights, including life, liberty, and property, became foundational to the Declaration of Independence. Locke's ideas about the social contract and the right to revolution justify the colonists' actions. In terms of thinking, it's actually really close to Voltaire, actually. Montesquieu, who's a French philosopher from the Encyclopedia, his theory of the separation of powers influenced the structure of the US government, as outlined in the Constitution, notably considering his views on liberty, property, trade, and government role. So limited government action, actually, on the society. Adam Smith, while not strictly an Enlightenment philosopher, his economic ideas about free markets and limited government intervention resonated with many colonists who advocated for economic independence from Great Britain. Okay, so now if we try to have a conclusion, we can say that naturally the American and French revolutions, as we just saw, were deeply influenced by Enlightenment thought, right? So the French Revolution produced iconic philosophical figures. The American Revolution was also shaped by the same ideas of these intellectual giants. These shared intellectual foundation contributed of the revolutionary favors in both nations and laid the groundwork for democratic principles that will define the modern world. So what we understand from democracy, what we understand from liberty, it's coming from these two events. Okay. Now we need also to highlight the point that, more control, more taxes, less representation, less political representation means that people are not taken seriously. They're taken as, people that being used and being forced to labor and not necessarily being part of the society that is defining the future. Their own future is not defined at all by them. It's solely defined by people that take advantage of them. Okay. So, while the American Revolution was primarily a rebellion against imperial control, we can say almost the French Revolution was driven on the same radical upheaval aimed at dismantling the entire social and political order. Nonetheless, the base is the same: taxes, more taxes. The other rest of the orders of the social classes were not paying any taxes, and too much control. The same situation as the American Revolution. So both revolutions laid the groundwork for the modern world, inspiring subsequent struggles for independence and democracy. That will be my mini conclusion on the part 1. So that was the spark. Let's go to the flames, where we will talk about the key events and leaders. Okay, see you in a minute.